Trump told Obama to stay silent, but Obama's response, delivered without anger, without even saying Trump's name, shook the entire country in ways no one saw coming. The room was thick with tension. Even before the question was asked, reporters sat shoulder to shoulder inside the James S. Brady press briefing room at the White House, their pens-ready cameras fixed on the podium. President Trump stood there combative as ever, his hands gripping the sides of the lectern as though it were a sparring partner. Then came the moment that would ignite the country. Barack Obama has been one of the most divisive figures in American history. Trump said, his voice sharp, carrying across the crowded room. And for the good of this nation, he should stay silent. He's had his turn. He should step aside for a second silence. The kind that makes even the buzzing fluorescent lights sound louder. Reporters glanced at each other, scribbling notes, mouthing silent, "Wow!" to their colleagues. Then the questions began to fire. Mr. President, are you saying former President Obama should stop commenting on national issues? One reporter asked. Trump leaned forward. Exactly. This country doesn't need him giving his speeches, criticizing, acting like he's still in charge. It's harmful. He should just be quiet. The words reverberated far beyond the room within minutes. Headlines flashed across television screens in living rooms from Phoenix to Pittsburgh. Social media feeds lit up with disbelief, anger, and applause depending on where people stood. It wasn't unusual for Trump to attack opponents, but this felt different. It was direct. It was public. It was aimed squarely at a man who still carried enormous respect. Even years after leaving office in South Bend, Indiana, a retired teacher named Laura Whitman sat forward on her couch, remote in hand. Did he just say that? She whispered to no one in particular. Her husband Michael shook his head slowly. That's not going to sit well with people. And in a bar in Flagstaff, Arizona College, students clustered around a TV above the counter, trading comments over their beers. One of them, a political science major named Devin Blake, laughed nervously. He's practically daring Obama to respond. It wasn't just average Americans reacting in Washington. Journalists tapped at keyboards with a fury. Editors shouting across newsrooms to get the clip uploaded before their competitors, former aides to Obama's administration, began exchanging text messages. Should he respond? Would he or would silence be stronger inside the White House? Trump seemed satisfied with himself. He moved on to the next question, brushing off the furor he had just ignited. But the remark carried an unmistakable message. Trump wanted Obama out of the national conversation for years. He had bristled at Obama's lingering influence, whether through speeches, interviews, or even a casual remark about the direction of the country. Now he was saying it out loud. And yet, the irony was clear in trying to silence Obama. Trump had put him back at the center of the national conversation by nightfall. Every major cable network was replaying the exchange. Commentators argued endlessly, some calling Trump bold, others reckless. Many questioning why a sitting president seemed so consumed with the man who came before him. At a small diner in Akron, Ohio, a truck driver named Bill Henderson pointed at the TV on the wall. "You don't tell a former president to shut up," he muttered between bites of his sandwich. "That's just not how this works." The waitress behind the counter nodded. "Refilling his coffee makes him sound scared," she said under her breath. The sense of anticipation grew. If Obama responded, it could dominate headlines for days, maybe weeks if he didn't. It might leave people guessing what he really thought and maybe make his silence even louder than words. Either way, the confrontation was set that night as anchors in Los Angeles and Dallas closed their broadcasts. They ended with the same question. Would Obama respond? No one knew, but the entire nation was waiting. But the truth was, inside Obama's own circle, conversations were already underway about whether staying silent was still an option. In the quiet of his Washington, D.C. home, Barack Obama sat in his study, a book half open on his lap. But forgotten for the moment, the television in the background replayed the press conference clip over and over. Trump's voice filled the room for the good of this nation. He should stay silent. Michelle leaned against the doorway, arms folded, her eyes fixed on her husband. "You knew this was coming eventually," she said softly. "He's been circling you for years." Obama didn't look upright. Away he tapped the spine of his book with his index finger. Thinking finally, he replied, "Yeah, but saying it like that, telling me to be quiet. That's new on the other side of town." Former aides and staffers who had worked alongside him during his presidency were on their phones. Messages flew back and forth. Some wanted him to hit back immediately. Others thought silence was the smarter move. Don't let him drag you into a fight. One text read. Another said, "The country needs to hear from you now." But in the Obama household, the mood was cautious. Michelle wasn't urging him to rush into anything she had watched the toll politics took on him over the years. "You don't owe him a response," she said, walking into the room and sitting across from him. "Sometimes silence says more." Obama sighed. That he could hear the echo of her words, but his mind was already racing. His daughters, now young adults, had texted him, too, each with their own perspective. Malia wrote, "Ignore him. He wants attention." Sasha's message was shorter. "Dad, people still look up to you. Don't let him rewrite things." That was the dilemma. If he stayed silent, Trump's words might stand uncontested, shaping how people thought about his presidency. If he spoke, he risked being dragged into a political storm he tried to avoid since leaving office the next day in a private office at Georgetown University. A few trusted former advisors gathered around a long oak table. Valerie Jarrett, who had been one of his closest confidants, leaned forward. "Barack, with all due respect, this isn't just about you. This is about the precedent it sets. If a sitting president can tell a former president to shut up and no one pushes back, what does that say?" Obama listened to his hand resting under his chin across the table. Another voice chimed in. David Seamus, a longtime strategist. "We also have to think about the bigger picture. The nation's already polarized. If you respond too strongly, it feeds his narrative. If you're too soft, it looks like he intimidated you." The room was divided, and so was Obama's heart. He'd always believed in measured words and timing, in choosing battles carefully. But the pressure outside those walls was building across the country. His supporters were speaking out in Toledo, Ohio. A group of community organizers gathered at a small office decorated with faded campaign posters from 2008. A young organizer named Tamara looked around the room. People are waiting for him to say something. They want to feel like someone still cares about truth and decency. Back at home that night, Michelle joined him on the porch. The summer air was heavy and crickets sang in the distance. Obama leaned back in his chair, his face lit by the faint glow of his phone as he scrolled through headlines that they're already writing. "Think pieces about whether I should respond," he said quietly. "Some are saying silence is weakness. Others are saying restraint is strength." Michelle placed her hand over his. "Barack, you've always said the right words come when they're needed most. So ask yourself, are they needed now for a long moment?" He didn't answer. He just watched the night sky above the same sky that had looked down on him when he stood on stages in Iowa, in Denver, in St. Louis, speaking about hope and unity. That part of him wasn't gone. It was just waiting. But the longer he waited, the louder the calls grew. And soon staying silent started to feel like a choice he couldn't afford to make. By the third day after Trump's remarks, the pressure had become impossible to ignore. Every major network had run panels dissecting Obama's silence. Was it strategic restraint or was it hesitation? Social media swirled with hashtags. Speak. Obama trended on Twitter, as did #stay silent. The nation was watching, waiting, projecting their hopes and frustrations onto one man who hadn't said a word in the Obama household. The debate was reaching its own breaking point. The living room had turned into a makeshift war room. Newspapers were spread across the coffee table, each one carrying Trump's quotes in bold headlines. CNN replayed the clip on loop while Fox News commentators framed Obama as too scared to reply. Michelle walked in carrying 2 mugs of tea, setting one beside her husband. "You can't carry this weight forever," she told him gently. "But I know you feel like you have to." Obama rubbed his temple. "It's not about me. It's about what this moment says to the country. If I respond, I don't want it to be about ego or about trading insults. It has to mean something." That afternoon, he called Valerie Jarrett. The two had spoken countless times over the years, but this conversation carried a different edge. "Val, I need to know what happens if I say nothing," Obama asked, her voice cracked through the phone. "If you say nothing, his words stand. And in this climate, silence will be painted as surrender. People will think you're afraid to confront him. You're not. But perception matters." Obama exhaled slowly. He knew she was right, but he also knew the risks. The country was already a tinderbox. Economic frustrations, cultural divides, and political tensions that seemed to grow every week. One wrong word could ignite chaos. Later that evening, he called his daughter Sasha. Answered first. Her voice was firm, more grown-up than he remembered from their White House years. "Dad, you always taught us that when someone bullies, you don't back down. You don't have to fight dirty, but you stand up." Malia chimed in her tone, softer, but no less pointed. "You've always believed in words, Dad. If you don't use them now, when will you?" He sat with their words long after the call ended. His daughters, his wife, his closest advisors. They were all telling him the same thing in different ways. The nation wasn't just waiting for Obama, the man they were waiting for. Obama, the voice. Meanwhile, out in the country, the need for that voice was becoming painfully clear. In Dayton, Ohio, a group of high school students gathered in their civics class watching the press conference on YouTube. Their teacher, Mr. Reynolds, paused the clip and asked, "What do you think he should do?" A boy in the back raised his hand. "He should clap back. Show Trump. He can't silence people." A girl near the front shook her head. "No, he should be calm. Just remind people of what leadership should look like." Their debate mirrored the national one fight: fire with fire or rise above. The next morning, Obama went for a walk through his neighborhood, his Secret Service detail trailing quietly a few steps behind. He passed joggers, dog walkers, and parents pushing strollers. Some recognized him and waved, others just gave a small nod of respect. A middle-aged man paused his run and said, "We need your voice, sir. Don't let him take it away." Obama thanked him quietly and kept walking, but the words stuck. Ordinary people, strangers, were waiting on him that night. Back at his desk, he pulled out a legal pad. His handwriting was slow, deliberate. He wasn't writing a speech yet, not officially. He was writing questions to himself. What is my responsibility? What does the country need? How do I answer without lowering myself to his level? Hours passed. The legal pad filled. Finally, he set his pen down and looked toward the doorway where Michelle had appeared again. She didn't speak. She just raised her eyebrows, waiting. "I think I have to do this," he said finally. Michelle walked in, kissed him on the forehead, and whispered, "Then do it the way only you can." But if deciding to respond was difficult, figuring out how to say it would prove even harder, and the preparation itself would become its own battle. The decision was made, but the hard part had only just begun. Barack Obama wasn't a man who dashed off sound bites or let emotion carry him into the spotlight. Every word he had spoken in public life had been carefully considered, crafted with precision if he was going to answer Trump's attempt to silence him. It couldn't be casual. It had to matter. It had to last. The next morning, his home office looked more like a campaign headquarters than a quiet study. Stacks of notepads, highlighted articles, and laptops filled the desk. Former aides had been brought into the loop, most via Zoom calls that stretched late into the night. Their faces flickered across his computer screen, familiar and trusted, each one offering a different angle. David Seamus leaned forward through the screen, his voice steady, but urgent. "Barack, we need to be strategic. If this comes across as a personal spat between you and Trump, you'll lose half the country before you've even started. You have to rise above the pettiness." Valerie Jarrett, sitting on the same call, nodded. "Speak about values, not personalities. This isn't about you versus him. It's about the idea of leadership itself." Obama scribbled notes in the margins of his pad, "So the tone has to be calm, measured, but firm." "Exactly," Valerie said. "People need to feel the steadiness that's missing right now." Meanwhile, Michelle walked in and out of the room, listening quietly. She didn't offer long speeches, just short reminders. Make sure you're speaking to the people who've lost faith, not just the ones who already support you. And once as she set a plate of food on his desk, she added, "Don't waste time mentioning his name. Everyone knows who you're talking about." The house itself took on a rhythm. Days bled into nights as drafts were written and rewritten. Obama paced the hallway with a yellow pad in hand, murmuring phrases to himself, scratching them out. Starting again, he tested sentences aloud, listening to how they sounded, How they carried one night as rain tapped against the windows. He stood in the living room with Valerie on speakerphone. "What about this?" he said, reading a line he had just written. "Leadership isn't about silencing voices. It's about listening, even when it's uncomfortable." There was a pause. Then Valerie's voice. "That's it. That's the kind of line that people remember." Michelle, sitting on the couch with her arms crossed, smiled slightly. "That one sounds like you still doubts lingered,"